I remember that evening so clearly it feels like it just happened an hour ago. She came through the doorway like she was walking into a hotel lobby, not our house, not the place we built together out of thin paychecks and late nights and a lot of small hopes. She had her big leather purse slung over her shoulder, phone in hand, and that look on her face that said she'd already had this conversation in her head a dozen times. She didn't even bother to take her shoes off. Just stood there in the middle of the hallway and said, almost bored, "I'm going to stay with Lisa for a couple weeks. I need to think. I need space." She didn't look at me when she said it. She stared past me at the coat rack or the dent in the wall behind my shoulder. And the thing that sticks in my head most was that her voice didn't even shake. It was like she was telling me the weather report, something she wasn't personally invested in. I remember feeling something in my chest drop, like a brick falling off a scaffold. My first thought wasn't panic or sadness. It was this cold clarity, this realization that I didn't care to hear her reasons anymore. I looked at her, and she finally met my eyes for half a second, and all I saw there was tiredness. Not regret. Not affection. Just the kind of fatigue you get when you've decided something long before you had the guts to say it out loud. Then she turned and walked into the kitchen, rummaging around like nothing had happened, and I thought to myself, this is it. This is the part where you figure out exactly how much self-respect you've got left. But let me back up, so you understand how we ended up here. My name's Peter. I'm a bricklayer by trade. Been doing it since I was 19, when I dropped out of school because my old man had a stroke and somebody had to bring in money. I never minded hard work. Never cared that my hands looked like they'd been through a meat grinder half the time. I liked the routine. The early mornings, the quiet on the site before everyone showed up, the satisfaction of seeing a wall stand straight because you made it so. Emily, she was different from the start. I met her in a bar on a Friday after a long week. She was with a couple girlfriends, and I remember her laughing, not the polite kind of laugh, but the kind that took over her whole face. I liked that. It felt honest. I'd had enough of women who smiled just to fill a silence. She had this way of making you feel like she'd already decided you were worth knowing. We got to talking over cheap draft beer, and at some point she said, "You know what I like about you? You seem real. No fronts." That stuck with me. I thought, hell, maybe this time I've found someone who won't expect me to be more than I am. Our first couple of years were good. Not perfect, but good in the kind of way you don't question. We rented this small brick house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a little yard where she tried to grow tomatoes and only got weeds for her trouble. I'd come home dirty and tired, and she'd roll her eyes about the footprints I left on the kitchen tile, but she'd still hand me a cold beer and ask about my day. We had a little routine. Saturday mornings, I'd make pancakes, burnt more often than not, and she'd read out loud from those celebrity gossip magazines she liked. We'd sit at that rickety kitchen table and it felt like a team. But if I'm honest, the cracks were there even then. Little things that didn't mean much at first. The way she'd sigh when I talked about saving up to maybe start my own masonry business someday. The way she'd change the subject if I brought up having kids. I told myself it was nothing. Just normal ups and downs. Over time, those little cracks got bigger. I remember this one night, maybe a year and a half ago, when I got home late because the foreman had me stay to finish a retaining wall. I'd texted her I'd be late, but when I walked in, she was already in bed, facing the wall, not even pretending to be asleep. I stood there in the doorway, waiting for her to turn over, say something. She didn't. So I went to the kitchen, heated up some leftover stew, ate in silence. When I came back, she still hadn't moved. That was the first time I felt something closing off between us, like a door I couldn't open. I didn't want to admit it to myself then, but I could feel her patience wearing thin. Sometimes she'd look at me like she was cataloging all the ways I disappointed her, like she was running a list in her head. I tried to fix it in small ways. Took extra shifts to bring in more money. Bought her flowers on random Wednesdays. Asked her to pick a weekend and we'd go somewhere, even if it was just a motel by the river. She'd nod, say, maybe, and that would be it. There was this one text conversation I saved on my phone, not sure why. Maybe because it summed everything up better than any argument we ever had. Me, you okay? You've been quiet lately. Emily, just tired. Me, anything you want to talk about? Emily, no. Me, you sure? Emily, yeah, that was it. For lines, and I knew nothing would change. I used to sit on the back steps after work, boots still on, and wonder how we'd gotten here. I'd look at that little patch of dirt where she'd tried to grow her tomatoes and think about the night she brought home the seeds, so excited she could hardly stand still. She'd hugged me from behind while I washed my hands, telling me she finally felt like this place was ours. Now she couldn't even stand to be in the same room with me for 10 minutes. I know people expect some big scandal to explain why marriages die, but sometimes it's just a slow grinding down, a million little moments when you stop being on the same side. And I guess that's what happened to us. The thing about laying brick is, it teaches you patience whether you want it or not. You can't rush a wall. You have to lay each line straight, check your level, wipe off the excess mortar. One sloppy row will throw the whole thing off. I always thought if I just kept working at us the way I worked on the job, it'd come out right in the end. But a marriage isn't a wall you can rebuild from the bottom up. I remember one Saturday morning that should have been simple. I'd come in from a long week, 60 hours easy, and all I wanted was to make pancakes, sit at the kitchen table, pretend everything was still good. She was already up, sitting on the couch in her old sweatshirt, scrolling on her phone. The TV was on, volume low. "Morning," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "Hey." She didn't look up. I thought I'd make breakfast. "I'm not hungry." She didn't say it like she was annoyed, more like she was stating a fact. I stood there, spatula in one hand, wondering how many times a man can try before it starts to feel pathetic. So I made pancakes anyway, ate them alone at the table. She never glanced over. After that, I stopped trying so hard. I'd come home, we'd exchange a couple words, then drift to opposite corners of the house. It was like living with a polite stranger. A couple weeks later, I got home early. Some rain had shut down the site, and found her sitting in the kitchen with her cousin Jenna. They didn't hear me come in. I stood there a second, taking in the scene. Emily with her hands wrapped around her mug like it was the only warmth she had left. Jenna leaning forward, voice low. "I just don't think you're happy," Jenna was saying. "You look exhausted every time I see you." Emily sighed. "It's not that he's a bad man. He's just always going to be who he is. You know? He doesn't want more." More. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. I cleared my throat, and they both jumped. "Didn't mean to eavesdrop," I said. Emily didn't say anything. Jenna gave me an awkward smile, mumbled something about needing to pick up her kids, and slipped past me out the door. Emily stood, walked to the sink, started rinsing her mug. Like nothing had happened. I didn't ask her to explain. Part of me didn't want to hear her say it again, how I wasn't enough, how I was never going to change. That night, we didn't speak. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing next to me. I tried to remember the last time we'd laughed together, really laughed, not just traded polite smiles. I couldn't. A few days later, I was on a job pouring a footing behind a grocery store. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I wiped the mortar off my hands before answering. It was Emily. "Hey," I said, cautious. "Hey." Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. "Everything okay?" "Yeah. Just wanted to let you know I'll be late tonight. Going to dinner with Lisa." "Okay." A pause. "Peter, do you ever think we're wasting time?" I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. She sighed. "Never mind." Click. I stood there holding the phone, feeling like I'd been handed a warning I couldn't do anything about. I tried to shake it off, focus on the job, but my hands kept moving slower and slower. I thought about how different we used to be, how she'd once sent me texts during the day just to say she missed me. I still had some of them saved. "Emily, can't wait to see you tonight." "Me? Same here." "Emily, hurry home." That was years ago, but I read them sometimes like they were messages from another lifetime. By the time I pulled into the driveway that night, it was dark. She wasn't home. I went inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and stood there for a while, just listening to the empty rooms. When she finally came in around 10, she looked surprised to see me still up. "You didn't have to wait," she said, shrugging out of her coat. "I know." She moved past me into the kitchen, opened the fridge, poured herself a glass of water. Like nothing was wrong. And maybe that was the worst part. How ordinary it all felt. I wanted to ask her if she'd made up her mind already, if she was just waiting for the right moment to leave. But I kept my mouth shut. I've never been good at big speeches. After that night, I started working longer hours on purpose. It was easier to be tired enough not to think. Easier to come home late and go straight to bed. One evening, I stayed behind after the rest of the crew had clocked out. I was stacking leftover materials when my buddy Shane walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Man, you look beat," he said. "Yeah," I grunted. "You two still not talking?" I just shook my head. Shane hesitated, then said, "Look, I don't mean to pry, but sometimes you gotta ask yourself if you're hanging on because you really believe in it, or because you don't know what else to do." I didn't answer. Didn't want to admit he was right. It wasn't all bad, though. Sometimes we'd have a flicker of what used to be. Like the night she brought home takeout, and we ate on the couch, watching some dumb reality show. For an hour, it felt almost normal. But when I tried to put my arm around her, she stiffened, and the moment was gone. Those moments were the hardest, because they gave me hope I knew better than to have. I think the real turning point, though, wasn't the big announcement later. It was all these small moments that added up, brick by brick, until the wall between us was too tall to climb. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't see it coming. You know, sometimes I think the worst part wasn't that she wanted to leave. It was how long she stayed before she finally said it out loud. Like she'd already checked out months before she bothered to pack a bag. It started showing up in the smallest ways. The way she stopped waiting up for me. The way she'd pour herself a cup of coffee and not bother making one for me anymore. The way she'd get dressed in the mornings without a word, purse over her shoulder, keys already in hand. One morning I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, and she came in to grab something from the cabinet. Our eyes met in the mirror. She looked at me like she was looking at someone she used to know. No anger, no warmth, just a kind of weary distance. "Peter," she said, voice flat. "Do you ever think maybe this isn't working?" I spat into the sink, rinsed my mouth. What isn't working? This. Us. I kept my eyes on my toothbrush. I think it used to. She didn't reply, just turned and walked out. That's when I started feeling something in me harden. Like a callus you get on your hands when you've been carrying something heavy too long. A few days later, I ran into our neighbor, Mrs. Dwyer, when I was hauling trash out to the curb. She was a small woman in her 60s who liked to water her roses in the evening. She looked over the hedge and said, "You doing all right, Peter?" Yeah, I lied. She gave me that look older folks give when they know you're full of shit. Haven't seen Emily around much. She's been busy. Mrs. Dwyer nodded slowly, like she'd heard that line before. Well, you let me know if you need anything. I thanked her and went back inside. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the counter where Emily had once lined up jars of pasta and spices like she was building something permanent. Now it was just cluttered with unopened mail. The next weekend, I tried to do something, anything, to pull us back together. I got up early, cleaned the house top to bottom, scrubbed the tile grout, wiped down the cabinets, even washed the curtains. I made her coffee the way she used to like it, black with 2 sugars, and set it on the table next to a plate of toast. When she came in, she paused in the doorway, eyebrows raised. "What's all this?" "Figured we could have breakfast together," I said. She looked at the coffee, then at me. "I'm not hungry." I nodded, picked up the cup, poured it down the sink. She watched me with that same tired expression, like she wished I'd stopped trying so hard. After she left, I sat down at the clean table and realized it didn't feel like my house anymore. Around that time, I started spending more evenings at the site, helping Shane finish up odds and ends. One night, we were patching a corner wall that had cracked. Shane looked at me and said, "You sure you don't want to take a break, man? You're here more than you're home." "I like it here," I said. "Yeah," he muttered. I can see why. He didn't push it further, but we both knew what he meant. The more time I spent away, the more I dreaded going back. I'd park my truck in the driveway and just sit there, engine ticking, watching the porch light flicker. Sometimes I'd text her from the cab, even though I knew she wouldn't reply. "Me, home in 10. Nothing." "Me, you want me to pick anything up?" Still nothing. It was like she'd decided silence was easier than pretending. Then came the day she told me she was going to Lisa's. It was a Thursday. I'd gotten off early and thought maybe I'd cook dinner. Something simple, spaghetti, garlic bread. I was standing in the kitchen when she walked in, still wearing her work badge on a lanyard. She didn't even set her bag down. "I'm going to stay at Lisa's for a bit," she said, not meeting my eyes. I turned from the stove. "What?" "I need some space." "For how long?" "I don't know. A couple weeks. Maybe more." I leaned back against the counter. "That's it? That's all you've got to say?" She sighed. "I'm tired, Peter. I can't keep pretending." Her voice wasn't angry, just flat, like she'd rehearsed every word. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of what was boiling in my chest. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "You do what you gotta do." She nodded, turned, and started packing a small duffel bag, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her side, already stripped of her pillow, and the blanket she always complained was too scratchy. I looked around the room and felt like a guest in a place I used to own. I thought about all the times she'd told me she loved me. About that first year when she used to press her cold feet against mine under the covers. About the way she traced the line of my jaw with her finger when she thought I was asleep. And all I could think was, where the hell did that woman go? The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, just the quiet of a house that finally matched how we'd been living. I walked into the kitchen, made myself coffee, and realized I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel sadness, just a hollow relief that at least I didn't have to pretend anymore. But even then, I didn't know that when she came back, I'd be the one to end it for good. A week passed without her. It felt strange how easily the days fell into place once she was gone. I got up early, went to work, stayed late, came home to the quiet. I didn't have to guess whether she was in a bad mood or trying to avoid me. Didn't have to measure my words. Sometimes I'd sit out on the back steps after work, boots still on, and drink a beer while the sun went down over the neighbor's shed. There was a relief in that silence, even if I didn't want to admit it. The guys on the crew started to notice. Shane, especially. One afternoon, he came over while I was tying off rebar and said, "You seem different." "How's that?" "Don't know. Less tense, I guess. Yeah, I said. Feels like I can finally breathe. He didn't say anything after that, just gave me a look that said he understood. On the 8th night, she texted, Emily, I'm coming by tomorrow to grab a few things. I stared at the screen for a long time. Me, okay, that was it. No questions, no begging her to come home. I wasn't going to do that to myself. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every argument, every cold stare, every moment I'd felt like less than a man in my own house. It was like my mind wouldn't let me forget all the small humiliations I'd swallowed to keep the peace. At some point around 4 in the morning, I decided I was done. Not just with waiting, not just with hoping she'd change her mind. Done with pretending any of this was salvageable. The next day, I left work early. I didn't want her packing up while I was gone. I wanted to see her face one more time, to look her in the eye and make sure we both knew where we stood. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I heard her key in the lock. She came in carrying that same big leather purse, the one she'd slung over her shoulder when she left. Hey, she said, her voice low. I didn't answer right away. Just watched her walk into the living room and start pulling books off the shelf. Her old cookbooks, some paperbacks I'd bought her one Christmas. She moved with this calm efficiency, like she'd been planning every step. Peter, she said after a while, I'm going to take a few more clothes. Take whatever you want. She glanced at me, eyes flicking away almost instantly. I'll be staying at Lisa's a bit longer. I nodded. How long's a bit? She hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Maybe permanently. Something in me went still. Like the last piece of me that cared about fighting for this finally gave up. I leaned back in my chair. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want, she whispered. Yeah, you do, I said. You just don't want to say it out loud. She closed her eyes, set down the stack of books, and let out a shaky breath. Peter, I can't keep pretending. This isn't working. The words hung there, heavy and final. I studied her face, trying to find any trace of the woman I'd met in that bar. The woman who laughed with her whole face, who used to press her cold feet against mine at night. But she was gone, and maybe I'd been gone for a while too. I stood up, walked over to the sink, ran water over my hands because I didn't know what else to do with them. She started talking again, voice softer now. I'm sorry. I really am. You've always been good to me. I held up a hand. Don't. She stopped mid-sentence. I don't want the apology, I said. I don't want any of it. Just take what you need and go. She swallowed, blinking fast. You don't have to be like this. Like what? So cold. I almost laughed at that. You spent the last year freezing me out. What did you think I'd turn into? She didn't reply, just went back to gathering her things. The next hour passed slow. She moved from room to room, folding clothes, filling boxes. I sat at the table the whole time, listening to the drawers opening and closing, the tape ripping off the roll. Every now and then she'd pause in the doorway like she wanted to say something. But she never did. When she finished, she set the boxes by the door. I'll come back for the rest another day, she said. No, I told her. Her head jerked up. What? I don't want you coming back. Peter. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. Don't come back. Don't text me about picking up anything. I'll leave your stuff on the porch if you really want it. Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not sorrow. Just empty. Is that really what you want? She asked. Yeah, I said. That's what I want. She stared at me a moment longer, then nodded like she finally believed me. She picked up her bag and walked to the door. For a second, she hesitated, her hand on the knob. Goodbye, Peter, she whispered. Yeah, I said. Goodbye. She left, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. I didn't move for a while after the door closed. Just stood there, looking around at the house that felt both emptier and somehow more mine. I thought about how much I'd tried to make it work. About every time I'd bitten my tongue to keep from starting another argument. Every time I'd told myself that things would get better if I just held on a little longer. But in the end, all that holding on had done was drag out something that had been dead a long time. And standing there in that quiet, I finally understood it wasn't weakness to let go. It was the only honest thing left to do. The first night after she left for good, I didn't know what to do with myself. I kept expecting to hear the bathroom door click shut, or her voice drifting down the hallway asking if I'd seen her charger. I'd walk into a room and think I'd see her standing there, folding laundry or checking her phone. But the house stayed quiet. I sat in the living room with the TV on low, not really watching it. There was a half-empty beer bottle on the coffee table, and I remembered just staring at the label, running my thumb over the condensation. I thought about texting her. Just to say what? I wasn't sure. Maybe to ask if she got where she was going. Maybe to say I hoped she was okay. But I didn't. Instead, I powered off my phone and left it face down on the table. Around midnight, I finally went to bed. I lay there in the dark, listening to the house creak and settle. It felt bigger than I remembered. Like all the space she used to fill was suddenly just air. I closed my eyes and waited for the regret to come. For the panic, the loneliness. It didn't. Mostly, I felt tired. The kind of tired that goes bone deep. The next morning, I got up early, same as always. Made coffee, ate toast standing over the sink. When I looked around, nothing felt different. But everything was. At work, Shane took one look at me and raised his eyebrows. "She gone?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He nodded slowly. "You okay?" "Better than I thought I'd be." "Good." He clapped me on the shoulder. "About time." I knew he meant it kindly, but it still felt strange hearing it out loud. Like we were all in on something I'd been too stubborn to see. The days started to run together. I'd come home to the same quiet house, make dinner, sometimes stand in the doorway of what used to be her side of the closet. Half the hangers were empty now. A few times, she texted about picking up the rest of her things. I didn't answer. I just packed everything she'd left, clothes, shoes, a box of old hair products, and left it all in 2 plastic bins by the porch. She must have come by when I was at work because one day they were gone. No note, no text, nothing. And that was fine with me. One evening, I was sitting out back, drinking a beer, when Mrs. Dwyer poked her head over the fence. "Peter." "Yeah." She studied me a moment. "Just wanted to say, I'm sorry things didn't work out." "Thanks." "You know," she said, lowering her voice like she was telling me a secret. "My first marriage ended the same way. Quiet. No yelling. Just done." "Yeah," I said. "Feels like that." She nodded. "It gets easier." I didn't doubt it. After a while, I stopped noticing the little reminders of her. The empty space on the bathroom counter where she used to keep her lotions. The second coffee mug that never got used. The pair of slippers by the door. One Saturday, I finally threw them out. I thought it would feel like erasing her. But it didn't. It felt like clearing space for air. People always assume when something ends, you're supposed to be angry or heartbroken. But the truth is, sometimes you're just relieved. Sometimes you look back and realize you've been carrying something heavy for so long, you forgot it wasn't part of you. That's what it was like with Emily. We started out good. Better than good, even. She was funny and sharp and had this way of making me feel like I was enough. But over the years, that feeling faded. And maybe I changed too. Maybe I stopped trying to be anything more than I was. I used to think that was a failing. Now I'm not so sure. Some people aren't meant to grow in the same direction. And when you figure that out, you've got 2 choices. Keep pretending or step away. I'm glad I stepped away. It wasn't one big thing that ended us. It was all the little ones. The nights she turned her back in bed. The mornings she walked past me like I was a piece of furniture. The way her eyes glazed over when I talked about my day. 1,000 tiny moments that, put together, said, "This is over." The day she told me she was going to take some time, I finally understood she'd been gone long before she packed a bag. And when I told her not to come back, I meant it. People ask if I'm lonely now. Sometimes. But it's a better kind of lonely. The kind where you know you're not living a lie. I still wake up early, still lay brick every day. I come home to a quiet house and cook for one. And it's enough. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's honest. And after everything, I think that's all I ever really wanted. A month went by before I really settled into the new routine. It's strange how quickly you adapt when you finally stop fighting something. I'd get up before dawn, same as always. Shower, pull on my work pants, lace up my boots. The only difference was the silence. No soft shuffling of her in the hallway. No smell of her shampoo lingering in the bathroom. At first, it felt like loss. Like something essential had been ripped away. But little by little, it just felt normal. I'd come home after work and let the quiet wrap around me. No tension, no guessing what kind of mood I'd walk into. Just peace. One evening, I stayed late at the site to finish a chimney job. The sun was almost down when I finally loaded my tools in the truck. Shane walked over, wiping brick dust off his hands. "You sure you don't want to grab a beer?" he asked. "Nah," I said. "Think I'll just head home." He studied me for a second. "You're doing okay?" It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. "I am." He nodded, like that was all he needed to hear. At the grocery store, the cashier, young guy with a nervous smile, asked me if I needed help carrying my bags. I almost laughed. I'd been coming in there with Emily for years, the 2 of us filling a cart with food we'd pretend we'd cook together. Now I just grabbed the basics: bread, eggs, a few cans of soup. "Got it," I told the kid. Walking back to the truck, I realized I didn't miss those big shopping trips. Didn't miss the way she'd sigh over prices or complain about my choices. Funny how you think you'll miss everything, and then you don't. Sometimes, late at night, I'd remember the early days. I'd think about the night we met in that bar, her laugh bright and unguarded. The first time she kissed me, out behind the dumpster where no one could see. The time we moved into the house, her carrying a box labeled kitchen, while I joked it was heavier than the rest. We were happy then. And that's the part one chose to keep. Not the last year. Not the quiet resentment or the way she looked at me like I was in her way. Just the good parts. Because if you can't remember the good without bitterness, you'll never really let go. A couple weeks after she left for good, her cousin Jenna showed up unannounced. I was in the garage sorting tools when I heard the knock. Hey, she said when I opened the door. Can I talk to you for a minute? Sure. She shifted from foot to foot, like she wasn't sure how to start. Emily asked me to check if you were okay. I raised an eyebrow. She could have asked me herself. Jenna looked embarrassed. Yeah, she feels bad, you know. I leaned against the doorframe. Tell her she doesn't need to feel anything on my account. She said you were always good to her. I looked past her at the yard, at the fence I'd built with my own hands. I was. For as long as she wanted it. Jenna hesitated. She's not doing great. I didn't say anything. Anyway, Jenna said finally, I just thought you should know. Thanks, I said. She turned to go, but before she reached her car, I called out, Jenna. She looked back. Tell her I wish her well. Jenna nodded. I will. She drove away, and I went back to my tools. And that was the last time I heard anything about Emily. It's been months now. The house feels different. Not empty, just mine. I fixed the leaky faucet she used to complain about. Repainted the bedroom walls. Moved my workbench into the spare room. Sometimes, when I'm standing in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil, I think about how much energy I wasted trying to hold together something that had already slipped through my fingers. But I don't regret trying. I don't regret any of it. Because at least I know I did everything I could. And when it was over, I had the guts to say so. People still ask if I'm seeing anyone. I'm not. Maybe someday. But for now, I'm content to come home to my own space. To eat dinner in peace. To sleep in a bed that feels like mine again. It's a simple life. But it's honest. And after everything, that's enough. I still lay brick every day. Still wake before dawn. Drink my coffee black. And drive the same route to the site. Nothing much has changed. Except everything has. And that's okay. Because I finally learned that sometimes letting go isn't giving up. It's the bravest thing you can do.